important today to remember the soldiers who sacrificed their lives during this campaign. As you know, Anzac Day is commemorated every year on the landing's anniversary on 25 April to honor members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps Anzac who fought at Gallipoli. Anzac Day commemorative events are held every year also in Gallipoli, Turkey. The name Anzac Corps was officially recognized by the Turkish government on Anzac Day in 1985. In 1934, President Atatürk delivered the following famous words to the first Australians, New Zealanders, and British to visit the Gallipoli battlefield. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in our soil. You, the mothers who send their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace after having lost their lives on this land. They have become our sons as well. These words are inscribed on a monument at Arabura Cemetery at Anzac Beach, which was unveiled in 1985, and the words also appear on the Kemal Atatürk Memorial in Canberra, Australia. As you know, as allies in the Cold War, we stood together for values. We are now cooperating against international threats, such as terrorism. After 96 years, we remember once again these brave soldiers who fought for their countries and made the ultimate sacrifice. May they rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Edmund. Now we would like to have the speaker.
Thank you. Last year was the first event of this kind, and it was such a privilege to be here and to have some of you join us at our Anzac Day celebration on April 25th. This evening, I'm delighted to be back and in your great company and that of my consular colleagues to again commemorate those who fought and sacrificed at Gallipoli and who shared their lives for all of us so that today we can all be friends. And as I was thinking about the battle there so many years ago, and the fact that World War I was called the war to end all wars, sadly it wasn't. And we still, if we turn on the news tonight or any other night, will be besieged by tales of conflict and problems throughout many parts of the world. But I think the important lesson that we've all learned from Gallipoli and from the remarks that were just made about the history since then are such a reminder that people and countries who have matured, who have nurtured freedom for their citizens, who have learned the lesson of history that cooperation leads to far more development than simply stirring the cauldron of ancient hatreds. So I think it's a wonderful reminder for all of us today to look back at what happened at Gallipoli, what happened after the war as well, when President Atatürk made those incredibly impressive comments that still linger in our hearts, in the minds of people who lost relatives or who simply remember the history. And as we look overseas at what's happening in the Middle East and at what's happening in Japan, we see places where battles that were long fought and that are long over have had a very different kind of outcome in the minds and hearts of the people in those regions. So I couldn't help but be very pleased and proud of all the efforts that the Turkish people, the New Zealanders, the Australians, the Americans are making to help Japan recover from its most recent crisis and an ongoing crisis, and contrast that with what we're seeing in places like Libya. But one of the things that I think we can all take from the lessons of today and from yesterday is that we have the bonds of friendship as well as trade and political ties. We are people who stand together on so many fronts, whether they're humanitarian or whether they're political or military. In 2010, former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, spoke at the Anzac Day commemoration ceremonies in Australia. And he said that all nations are shaped by their histories, their memories, and their stories, by their triumphs, by their tragedies, by their myths, and by their legends, because together these are the things that shape a nation's soul. And I think one of the things that we see in the shaping of the nations we represent, or the nations we live in, and their souls, are some of those lessons from Gallipoli, that soldiers and sailors from every side, from every army, demonstrated tremendous courage, and there are countless stories of the courage of those soldiers, regardless of which country they were fighting for. They made tremendous sacrifices. They sacrificed their lives, their limbs, their futures. Their families made tremendous sacrifices too, losing their sons, their husbands, their brothers, their closest friends. They were compassionate, even on the battlefield. They came together. And in one example of that, on one day, they created their own ceasefire so that they could bury their dead and honor them. And then out of that came, I think, the lesson of a greater humanity. And that's what President Ataturk was talking about, and what countless politicians and leaders have talked about since. That those soldiers who made those sacrifices helped exemplify the values that have become the core of the nations that they served. And that's allowed those nations to move forward, to nurture their freedoms, and to share those with all the people. So I think tonight is our opportunity simply to honor them, to remember them, and always to take our lessons from their values as we move forward. Let us always remember the lessons of Gallipoli. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Booker. And now we would like to have Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, and thank you for having Banana and me come back this year. I've got to say it's a little bit daunting being the third speaker. One of the things that I noticed last year was that it's very difficult to find something new to talk about when you talk about what we call Anzac Day. We all know what happened there. We all know the basic history. But as I was struggling with what to talk about today, I really focused on how unique this situation is, just in general. You know, most countries celebrate military victories. You know, we celebrate Memorial Day, we celebrate the 4th of July, but there are very few instances where a country comes together with other countries and celebrates what was just a terrible disaster, really, for all sides. And I think that, so what I tried to do was go back and look at some of the unique things about this whole